Hi there, welcome at the second edition of the B2B Influencer Marketing Chat Series. My name is Mariska Kestelo and I'm the founder of Word of Mice. The topic of today is about B2B influencer marketing, of course, but also about employer branding. And therefore we have invited Patrick de Pauw, co-founder of Social Cedar. Welcome Patrick, welcome in our show. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Travel industry for 25 years. That's also why there's some joint, we know some people together. 6 years ago, I started with Social Cedar because we saw that the impact of word of mouth is bigger than expected. And that's when we started our company. And in the meantime, we have about 18 people working for the company, and we have international companies, about 250 organizations working with us. Voila.
So thank you so much. So today the purpose is to talk about, of course, B2B influencer marketing, but also about employer branding. So Patrick, because we see and hear the word a lot about employer branding, but can you explain how do you see, what is actually employer branding?
Employer branding is is an overall term for companies that want to have a very specific, or that every company needs to have a purpose, a common goal, a culture, a vision. All that together, sharing with your employees is basically the umbrella of employer branding. I know it's a very hot topic right now. But mainly also because the company at this moment, even now, even with the crisis, is a company is something is you are choosing for a company. Before it wasn't the case. When I started in a bank 28 years ago, I didn't care about the values. Who knew whether there were values? We went there because we just had to earn money, because I wanted to buy my first car. But now it's completely different. People are choosing for a company because they need to feel that that company has the same values, and this is why employer branding is very important these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that was actually also my second question. And why is employer branding now more important than ever? It's a word that we hear since the last, I would say, since the last few years. But if we're looking, say, apply it to the current situation, we're now all in a, I would say, in a crisis, pandemic. Why is employer branding now even more important than ever?
Because we see that how companies are behaving during crisis is also very important for their future. And employees, they want to know how companies are behaving in stress situations. So even like you mentioned, Mariska, even today we see that there's more activity in companies to get the word out, to show the values and to show that they care. Obviously, it's much more difficult because there's remote working. Before it was easier because you could have a session at noon, or you could have something at the coffee corner. Now this has to be done on a remotely, which is changing a bit, and that's where where you need some techniques and some tools in order to be able to get the message through to your coworkers.
Because yeah, we see now a lot of companies stop communicating during this crisis. A lot of, I would say, during a crisis, perhaps you see the true values of some companies. How do you think that? Because we talked also just earlier before we started the call. How do you think that some companies can come out of this crisis much stronger due to their employees? Do you think it's also because of their values, or is it, I would say, a mix of both the values and the employees, how they support each other?
It's always a mix of everything. Obviously, before the crisis, a company already had a certain company culture. It's not something that all of a sudden start when there's a crisis, but the crisis is just how do you say it? It's an extra stress on the way you communicate. And so what we see, or at least what I hear and what I also hear from a lot of companies, and not only hearing, but we see it also happening, is that more and more companies are aligning the message into their internal message with their external message.
Mm-hmm.
Before, often it was different. You had internal communications and you had external communications. I know of a company where we had to speak with two different stakeholders. One was internal com, somebody else was external com. They didn't align at all. They had different messages. So that was before. Now we see that more and more companies, they really want to go out, and because they want to create, they want to not only create, but they want to be authentic. If you are authentic, you create relevancy. So again, in theory, now it's more than ever that you need to get that message out, even if you don't have so much activity or less activity. You're still a company, and that company still has values. And the more the people know about the values, the better it's going to be for the future. And secondly, is the more people stand behind your values, the more impact you can create once that this crisis is going to evolve in reopening businesses. The power of your coworkers or the power of your fans on social media is huge compared to the power that you have as a company. So that's also the reason why today more than ever it's important to start looking at working and really not misusing, but asking your coworkers to share your message and your values.
Yeah, because if we talk, because we receive also a lot of questions from companies how to use and how to continue with the communication, and we don't have a budget right now to use external people because they only see influencers as external people, like they know the fashion and the beauty influencers. But I say there are so many types of influencers. Everyone here on the call today is also an influencer. So therefore I said, why don't you look also towards your employees or clients or even your suppliers as influencers? How do you think that nowadays I would say companies can, I would say, do you have any facts or figures?
Yeah,
Or,
but
I would say,
we have
yeah.
facts and figures, because in the meantime I think we have about 150 campaigns that's been sent out. Um, and you're absolutely right. Everybody is an influencer, because before everybody went from time to time, perhaps somebody a bit more than less, to a cafe, or you were talking in a cantina, and so everybody has this social network. What we see until end of February, the average reach of a person sharing something in person on social media is about 340, meaning that if you share a message, you reach about 340 people. Strangely enough, the last 4 weeks, this has been changed to 400. So the impact of people that are putting some content on social media has dramatically increased, and dramatically is exactly 26%. So there's probably reasons for this. The first reason is because there's more people behind the screens, like we are today, and we spend much more time on social media than ever. That's already one thing. The second thing is that we see that people are feeling more concerned and are really willing to bond more with their company, because they work remote. And if the company asks something, they will apparently they have more interest in doing so than before. We have 10% more activity on ambassadors, meaning that 10% of there's 10% more ambassadors sharing news at this moment. Probably we didn't have the time to ask them, but probably I think is because they are also willing to help, because everybody knows that it's a crisis. And the third reason is that due to the crisis, we also see that at least for the companies that are using, that are working on employer branding and on employee engagement, the message that they send out is apparently being much more relevant than before. Before, often the company still spoke about their product and their price and their blah, 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 which is nice, but basically nobody is interested to hear all this on social media. They're interested in, again, the authentic stories. What are they doing to make it a better world? What are they doing for their employees? What investments do they make for their employees? These are the pieces of content that people want to read and see on social media. And we see that, again, due to the crisis, at least the companies that were already using that form of communication have dramatically improved their content. So again, that's some figures, but it really shows the importance of working with people. Whether, again, Mariska, whether they are an influencer or not, again, you don't need to be a paid influencer to be an influencer. Everybody is.
No, but I think therefore it's good that you're sharing these data, because I always say that the reason why we started also with this webinar is to support each other and to share insights and experience, and really to help the people who are on this call, on this webinar, to help them to move further. And when I directly mention influencer marketing, people think already directly, oh, it's an extra cost. No, it doesn't have to cost anything extra, because these people are already in your network. And even despite the fact that you're working alone, you also have people in your network who want to support you. Like you said, people are more willing to support each other than ever. And we also talked with Alessia last week that now people who were perhaps out of your reach, perhaps famous people or famous speakers, they're also out of work. So they're perhaps now easier to reach out and to get the support. And I think now is even, I would say never is a good time to start, but I think now more than ever is a good time to start with your communication, and also together with your employees to come and to create, I would say, a better relationship, not only amongst the employees, but also for the company to move forward, because we don't know how the future will look like and when we can. I'm not saying that we go back to normal, because normal will change, but I think it's important that we inform each other, because there's also a lot of uncertainty and a lot of, people are insecure and uncertain. And it's like, you're building up a relationship. Like I gave the example last week also. It's like a marriage. If you're going to get married, you also don't stop your marriage or split apart as soon as you have the first discussion. So in this crisis also, I think it's important that you grow towards each other and find a good communication to come out much stronger and much more connected perhaps than you were if you're going, I would say, as a normal employee every day to your work. I mean, you are working for, you created Social Cedar. That's a concrete platform. Can you also give some, I would say, some suggestion ideas that people can do, of course, using your platform, but do you also see examples of suggestions that you've seen for people, that people can do with their employees to improve their communication, or nice initiatives that you have seen from your clients or beyond?
We have lots of examples, but the first, because I think you mentioned it, and I just want to come back to the fact that some companies are quiet or are more quiet because they don't have perhaps the content. We get quite a lot of remarks of, Patrick, now it's difficult because we don't have our content strategy team, or our content provider is not available to make a video. And then what we see already, and also before the crisis, is that content should not be expensive neither, because content should be, again, the authenticity of content is extremely important. But we have this special eye, we developed this special eye. If we scroll, that we see immediately, apparently, whether a message is genuine or whether it's not genuine. And if it's genuine, it creates quite a lot of impact. Talking about the figures, if you create good content on if it's really good content, at least you could expect that for every ambassador that shares something, there would be 10 people coming back to your website. I'm not talking about views and I'm talking about the shares, but people that are coming back to your website. Suppose that you have 1,000 ambassadors and you have really relevant content. Imagine how much traffic that you could create to your website. So this is the figure side. Some tips and tricks. Obviously, an employer branding and employee engagement, first of all, is it's a strategic choice. It's not a nice to have. It's not something that you say like, oh, it's crisis now. We are going to start with it, and we will see afterwards what because that's not how it works. It's about your DNA. It's about your culture. It's about your the why of your company, and it's about your vision. That's something that is directional. It comes from the board, it comes from a CEO, it can also come obviously from the co-workers, but it has to be supported by management, meaning that if you start something and you only you think that you have to invite, you think that I'm going to invite all my co-workers to become an ambassador, but I am not going to be one because I'm the CEO. This doesn't work. So that's the first thing. We need to show as leaders the example. If we don't show the example, it's going to be very difficult for other people to follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The second thing that we also saw was, do not create too much of a gamification thing out of it. In the beginning, the first steps with our platform were but there was some gamification, meaning the more you do, the more points you get, for instance. This is nice, but this also creates after a certain moment frustration for all the people who are not so social media savvy, who do not have such a big social media network. And like we just said, Mariska, our vision is that everybody is an influencer. Whether you're at the reception desk or whether you're a marketing director, it doesn't mind. Everybody should be able to join, meaning that the I would say the incentive part, how do you keep them alive, is not going to be a competition, but should more be like a community-driven incentive, where we do see that companies have an ambassador barbecue. They give extra courses on LinkedIn for their ambassadors. These are examples of possible possibilities, or random acts of kindness. Quite a lot of companies, they just randomly pick somebody who did some efforts, they give them some flowers. You create magic. One of the things that we've seen is do not use expensive incentives. Strangely enough, the less expensive, the more people find it interesting and they love it. If you start giving away an iPad, the person that gets the iPad is very happy and all the rest is very sad. But if you give flowers, it's creating something completely different. It's creating like, wow, great, this is fun. So these are just some examples of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like also your first point that you said. It's a strategic decision. It's not if the CEO, everyone from the employees need to follow, but the CEO is not online. That's also when I have conversations with clients. I always say it's a strategic decision to start with an influencer campaign or not. And a lot of people think that they can implement an influencer from the next day on. But therefore, we also need a good strategy. And it's not always, like you said, that the most expensive influencer or the most popular influencer is also the best one for your company. So there are a lot of alignments in your comments and in B2B influencer marketing. I just think that a lot of people just have if you talk about ambassadors, influencers have just a misperception about this role and this function, and that they can get a lot more out of this ambassadors, influencers, especially now in times of crisis, where sometimes people grow more towards each other. And then perhaps in other times, it will be in 2 weeks' time. We will also talk about also about ambassadors and influencers. So yeah, it's interesting that also for an influencer you can pay 10,000 euro, let's say, for a campaign, but it doesn't mean that you have the same values and that you will attract the audience that you want. You want an influencer that represents your values, and also has a personality that matches the company. If you're talking about an influencer especially from outside, if, for example, perhaps Alessia would be a better influencer for an Italian company because she's Italian than I would, because I don't speak Italian. It makes a common sense, but for a lot of people, it's very hard to imagine. If we talk about influencers, they directly think of the beauty, the fashion influencers, the famous people, and they don't think of that there is a word like B2B influencers, thought leaders, speakers, partners, even employees that you can use for the purpose of your company. And we talk also about the trending word is much more authentic.
Absolutely, we see it every time because most of the companies that are using social seeder are B2B companies. And we have companies that are working in steel or in material handling, which is not always the most sexy. It's not the same as I'm working for Netflix, but you do see that it's extremely effective because everybody has a network with likes. People say around the same age, people that have the same interest, geographical. There's some things that's also why lots of companies are using obviously employer branding and employee engagement in their recruitment strategy. Because the most efficient way to recruit people is through the people that are working in companies. That's been proven for quite some time. So again, the benefits are multiple. You have the fact that if people feel good and they feel that there's a good community, they stay on board, which is also important. And they will talk about you, and they will create quite a lot of fuss. And again, I just heard it, and I just want to share it because I think it was so interesting. I had somebody this afternoon on the phone, and it's a very small example. He was in a store in Leuven, which is a Flemish city, that had to close down the day that the government decided that every single company or store had to close, and it was a fashion shop. And the owner turned to the students, because apparently there were students working there, saying like, you don't have to come back anymore. It's a pity. We have to close down. Finito. And the person that was in the shop that I knew, he said like, how many students did ever work for your store? He said, well, over the last years, about 200. What if we ask these students to become your ambassador and start sharing your messages? Because he also has an online store. Well, in the meantime, and this is just genuine, that person sold for 50,000 euros the last month, thanks to all the students that became an ambassador because they've been working there. They've been earning money thanks to that person. And that person even didn't saw that there was this possibility. So it's just a very small example of how small efforts can create a very big impact.
Yes. And I think that's also what we should do right now, is to support each other, because we're in this situation together. Of course, the situation is totally not inappropriate, because at the moment I even can't fly towards your destination, and I'm not even if I will be able to fly even this year towards your destination. So I think if you will find people who can support your product or service, especially in our industry, who's been hit directly, and also will go through a major process of adapting, because we have the 1.5 meter economy, like we call it now in the Netherlands. How do we keep distance on 1.5 meters? How hotels, how events will look like in the future? It will be a major challenge, and will this be the norm or not? So there will be a lot of companies who will suffer and still will not have the same revenue as always. And you're coming from, of course, from the travel industry, which has also been hit very hard, of course, because people can't travel. Do you also have examples from that industry how they, as they use their employees as ambassadors, as influencers to continue to still, well, say, continue the story, to continue to talk about the product or company?
It's a pity because the travel industry at this moment, we have had some customers like TUI is a customer. But until recently, what I saw often is that the tourism industry is extremely focused on product and price, specifically in a B2C environment. It's all about New York at $299. There's been some storytelling, and they've been using some influencers. I've been using some influencers as well, but the genuine, authentic content wasn't there. Now we do have an example of the company where I worked for, where we relaunched the program 2 weeks ago, because it's a company with quite a lot of employees that are just sitting home doing nothing, but they're all passionate about traveling. And so what happened is that that company has asked through their program to try and think whether they have a link with somebody in Belgium. It's a Belgian company in some other part of the world, and start creating interviews online. So on Facebook, they have now every day, I think, about 2 interviews, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, because often it's somebody living in Asia or somebody living in the US. And they're just talking about how's life there, what is happening, blah, blah, blah. If I see, honestly, the reactions and the number of, at least I can only see the number of thumbs up that they get, it's huge compared to what they've been saying before. And before, they were always saying these very commercial things. Now we have a promotion there, we have a promotion there. They had 2 likes there, they had 14 likes there. Now we see that one session is followed by more than 200 people. And they're not even talking about selling something, but they use their coworkers to create.
And do you hope, I would say, is your aim also that after this crisis, that people say are more aware about their communication, about they will go slow, I say easy back to normal, because they're so eager to have business again? Do you think they have learned something from, I would say, what we are experiencing?
I can only hope so. It's going to be very difficult. I don't really know. I can honestly, I can only hope so. I think that it's not going to be business as usual anyhow. So the more, again, the only thing that I can say is you have to stand up. You have to be different from the rest more than ever. And everybody should think about it. Whether you are in the MICE industry, in the hoteling business, in whatever, in every single business. So I think that or at least I hope that there's some reflection. The reason why I said also that there's some delay on the tourism, and this is something I really saw, the tourism, basically the tourism industry, I cannot talk so much about the MICE industry, has been a very old-fashioned industry. They have not really adapted, although they really discovered social media, but they thought, at least when I was working for a travel company, they saw, for instance, social media as an additional channel next to radio, television, brochures and everything, which is not the case. Social media is not a television channel. Social media is your local cafe. And if you want to have friends in your cafe, then you have to tell something else than just the commercial bullshit, sorry to say so. And that was something that is very difficult in an industry where, obviously, which I understand, the margins are very low. So you need to really, every day, you need to hit that target, because otherwise you cannot survive. But what I missed, and that's also the reason why I left, was this strategic long-term thinking. It was more like, let's survive today and tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. And I hope that this is a time for reflection, not only for that industry, but for lots of industries.
Yeah. We have now 33 minutes, so I would say, do you have any other last question that we can wrap up and go to the questions of the participants that came in through through the chat. Do you have anything that you would like to add, or because we in a previous conversation we also talked about the relationship between ad campaigns that could be interesting to close, or is there anything else that you would like to add or say?
Well, ending a bit with what I was finishing is that we see that the investment, and then we just talk about the financial investment, which is going to be crucial as well, because after this crisis most of the companies will have budget restraints anyhow. So if you want to spend your money well, spend it on your co-workers and don't spend it immediately on the advertorials, because it's going to be much more efficient. So voila, that's my one-liner.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I have a question here from Valeska from the group, and she's writing, can a company oblige an employee to share their values or news in their private social media, or should this happen on a voluntary basis?
It should always happen on a voluntary basis. I think that, first of all, there's GDPR also, and so that means that you cannot, it's not only because of GDPR, but you cannot expect everybody to share your values. No, it has to be on an individual basis. You have to learn from it, because if you really learn, and that's the nice thing, if you ask people to do something on a voluntary basis, their behavior, which we see in the platform, will tell you whether there's something wrong. And probably if nobody wants to share your values, there's no problem with your ambassadors, then you have a problem. But you need to you need to be able to learn from the results. So again, the answer is no. Obviously, an ambassador is somebody who always has to do this on a complete voluntary basis.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good point. If nobody wants to share your content, then I think you should rethink. I think you need to sit down with your employees in a literal, literally face-to-face or virtual way to talk with your employees what's going on. And I have a question.
And also the other thing, because we have quite a lot of companies where they start and they say, like, become our ambassador, and they have like 1,000 people that say yes, 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 but then they see at the end that there's only 50% of the people that are really doing something. Then it's also important to go back to the ones that are that have raised their hands, saying like, well, at some point you were quite enthusiastic, but now apparently you don't share. So what would be the reason that you don't share? So there's quite a lot of things that you can get out of the behavior of your coworkers.
So you can also, we say, yeah, I don't know how to say, vinger on the pulse, houden we say in Dutch, so you can really see it's a way to know what's going on amongst your employees, and to know if they're still involved, is they're still engaged.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's also a very small story, but at a certain moment in a very big, I'm not going to say the name, but a very big industrial company, I had to go back after a year, and they, in fact, it started at the marketing department, and the marketing department told me, like, Patrick, we have a problem because we have only 75 ambassadors on a company which has about 5,000 co-workers. And then luckily next to her was HR, and HR basically told the marketing lady, no, Social Cedar doesn't have a problem. We have a problem. We have a problem because nobody wants to join the program. And apparently they knew it. They knew that there was a bad culture, but now, and also because we have quite a lot of benchmarks over different sectors and companies. Obviously, if you in each different company, if you send out an invitation to become an ambassador, why is it that in some companies there's 60% of people saying yes, and in other companies there's only 5% of people saying yes? It's nothing to do with the tool. It's everything to do with who you are, and that's what's so interesting in such a program as well. It basically shows you the temperature of your company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There is another question.
Yeah.
There's a question from Tiziana. How
Yeah,
is
there's
possible?
also. Oh yeah, go ahead, because there's another question from Mick, which was from the start, but I will ask that afterwards. And go ahead, Alessia.
Okay, so how is possible to ask your clients and partners to be your ambassador in a polite way?
In a polite way. Is that the question?
Yeah.
But it's everything we should, everything we do should be polite, also to your coworkers. I think it's, if you ask a question to your coworkers, it should be polite if you ask the question. But basically, we have quite a lot of companies, like just to name one, the Red Cross or UNICEF. They are also using external ambassadors, because you have quite a lot of external ambassadors with just the same principle, where they just invite their ambassadors to become, their fans or their stakeholders to become ambassadors. Obviously, there's a difference if you send that question to 1,000 external ambassadors than if you send the question to 1,000 internal people. But there's some companies that link that to NPS score. I don't know whether you all know what NPS score is.
Well,
it's the score that you can give.
Explain for the people who Net Promoter Score, but I don't think everyone is familiar with that.
The Net Promoter Score is basically the same as if you leave your car in a garage, and if you leave the garage, you have three buttons: a red, a green, and an orange one. Are you happy? Are you just okay, or are you unhappy with the service? NPS score is just the same, but it's a more, I would say, scientific approach. And we have quite a lot of companies where after surveys with their customers, everybody who has an NPS score of 8, 9, and 10, which means extremely happy with the service of that company, that result is followed by an invitation to become an ambassador. And then it's a very polite way, because you only also ask people that are already very happy, and you're not going to ask somebody to become an ambassador if he just had a very bad experience, because that would be wrong.
Yeah. Okay. I think Alessia is on mute. Oh yeah.
Now okay. we have one more question from Mick. Here is.
It's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I would say. Yeah.
How do you present your values in the best way?
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a question from Mick. So
I don't know Mick, but it's a very good question.
Mick is a very a very intelligent woman who's here on the line, and she's always working with values. To support clients. What can I do to improve myself and my company to serve my clients better? So she's a very value-driven lady. So therefore, I totally understand the question, and I'm really curious.
I'm not an expert inside the company, because we have a tool that goes outside the company, but there's some differences. What we see, that there's some differences between, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago and now. 5 or 10 years ago, whenever I entered the company, there was this big poster, a 4-post or a 2 poster, that was saying our values are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Nobody was reading this. That was like a chapter, and they wanted to hang this in their hotel so that everybody could see it, but nobody cared what was on that poster. So the only thing that we see, it's obviously building employer branding is a strategic exercise, and once you get the values out, you don't need to sum them up on a poster. We do see quite a lot of companies that are having mixed activities to try and show it to their co-workers, or eventually their customers on events. They have a CEO that makes a video, so it's much more. They also use different tools, different methods. At Noon, Swift is a technological company. They had at Noon the CEO that was talking about the values, but they wanted to really show the values and not just have the list with one slide. So it's going to be a mixture of doing the example, showing effectively that you mean, and then trying to translate that in a kind of a message, and that's the most important one. Translate these values in something which is understandable for people. Because just to have a side note, it's not that we're on LinkedIn, that you have to talk in very difficult terms, because even on LinkedIn, we're still all human beings and we want to just read something that we can understand. So try to just translate the message in something that people understand. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges of quite a lot of companies. Most of the companies, they all say that they have values. If you don't have values, I think that in the meantime, you don't have a company anymore. But how do you translate these values to your coworkers in such wordings that they understand it, and in such a wording that even the network can understand it? That's, I think, the challenge. We do have some examples of this, but that would lead us probably too far. But it's also about make it simple, make it come from yourself. Don't talk about. We see that a post, for instance, if you talk about culture, a post where you change the tone of voice in a tone of voice like if the person has said it himself, creates much more impact than we as a company stand for sustainability. If you change that in I'm working for a company that stands for sustainability, this is how you work. This is also how you talk in a cafe, creates much more impact. So just giving an example.
But do you also think that an inspiring example, if you are a business leader, CEO, the management, it's not only by wording, but it's also by following an inspiring example that people will copy the behavior? Because there are a lot of CEOs who say that they are value driven, but if you would follow, for example, their Facebook or posts privately, I'm sustainable, and they're doing the opposite in the private time, I think it's also it's not only by the wording and sharing this under your coworkers, but I think it's also by your behavior, by your personality, that you will inspire others.
And that's the big change that's going to happen. I think it's going to be even to change even quicker due to the crisis. But if people want to work or want to eventually visit a place, but at least if they want to work for a company, the first thing they do in lots of times is they go on LinkedIn, they were looking for the CEO. If the CEO has if he already has presence on LinkedIn, because there are still CEOs that are not present on LinkedIn, and if they don't show their values, there's probably lots of chance that they will not be interested in that company. And another example is we have quite a lot of companies, and I am sure that you know these companies, that where all the people are driving their small minis in 2 colors with the name of the company, and management is driving black BMWs X5 without any logo. And that shows that there's some mix-up that happened. I don't know why, but apparently the more you get paid, the less you have to show that you work for a company. The less you get paid, the more you have to show that you work for a company. This is something that is not of this world anymore. And I had a discussion with such a company, and they had to admit that it was like this. They had all these big black cars with nothing, but everybody else had to drive these cars with the big logos. Just reverse it. They have to be the first to drive the car, and then the rest will follow.
We've reached already 45 minutes. I see there's still one question. I will ask you this question, and then we will. I would say we will wrap it up, because I don't want to hold other people. I would say for the people that have to go, I totally understand. If you have any questions, you can send now in the chat already. We will reply to you, or you can send it. You can send it to us, and you will get a reply from me or Patrick, or both of us, on your question. So we will have the last one, and this is really also a very interesting one. How are ambassadors remunerated?
Well, most of the programs that we have, there's no remuneration, but you have to be clear from the start. So if you become an ambassador, you don't become an ambassador to make it to earn money, for instance. You become an ambassador because you genuinely are interested in that company. There's a big difference. That again, that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be any, we call it gratification instead of gamification, that you don't have to show, obviously, that you care and that you're very happy with all the efforts that the ambassadors are doing. And that's why we encourage companies to have these community incentives, again, instead of individual incentives. So from the 250 programs that we are running, there's only few programs that have incentives. And one of the reasons why we still have incentives is, as an example, for the recruitment part. Why? Because obviously in quite a lot of companies, if you can invite somebody that becomes a co-worker, you get a kind of remuneration because you did a good effort. That obviously is very logical, but we don't see really the logic in giving people money every time they will promote something online, because again, that doesn't create authenticity. It creates completely the opposite. But again, if organizations want to remunerate exceptionally an ambassador because they did a big effort, this is possible. But what we always say is, do it afterwards. Don't do it in the front. Don't say from the start, the more you do, the more you will get. Much nicer is, that person did an extreme effort, I'm going to give him flowers, or I'm going to give him some nice present, and that creates then again the wow, the excitement.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I think that was, we have now covered 49 minutes. So I think it was interesting to see that there were a lot of questions from the community, a lot of interest. So first of all, thank you so much, Patrick, for your time and for your suggestions and insights. Also, thank you, Alessia, of course, for your technical support. If you have any questions, send it to us. We have every week at 3 p.m. a session. So next week will be about destination marketing together with Napoli Convention Bureau. And the week after, it will be on 7th of May, we will talk about ambassadors from the industry, and also about relations between influencers and ambassadors. So thank you so much for your time, and I wish you have a lovely afternoon and a lovely evening. Thank you so much, and see you next week.